Okay, first thing getting started, you're going to want to open up your unanimated Whack News Wednesday bumper there. And we have the layers as you can see. And what we're going to do first, and again, first thing, just build it, make the end image exactly the way you want it, get it just perfect effects and everything, because you don't want to have to do that afterward. You can, but you don't want to. And next thing we're going to do is we'll need to kind of turn this into an animation. And the way you're going to do that is to open the timeline. Two ways to do that. You can go to Window and do the timeline option, or you can click down below at the bottom. There's often this little timeline button. So either way, we click timeline, and we should see it kind of snaps open here at the bottom. Now, sorry. Now, the first thing we have to do, of course, is click the button that says Create Video Timeline. And what that does is it creates a timeline animation for each and every layer of your Photoshop file. So anything that you want to animate needs to have its own layer. And sometimes that means you're going to have to break a word up. Like if I wanted to bring the W in by itself, I would need to put the W on its own layer. But in this case, you can see layer for layer, it matches up. One thing before we move on, looking at this timeline option here, oftentimes, including now, you're going to want to be able to expand and contract that. So if you move your cursor directly on kind of the darker line here, you can see how it turns into a double arrow. That allows me to kind of condense this down and shrink it up. While you do that, you may notice if you go up too high, all of a sudden you can't see your entire Photoshop file, and you can manage that the same way you manage Photoshop files usually. Command plus and Command minus will zoom in and out, and Command 0 will make it fit. This is one of the good times to go into one of the back booths and use a secondary monitor, because then you can actually just drag this timeline option all the way off. Speaking of which, if you do that by accident while you're trying to move clips, you can simply reset this whole layout by going up to Window, Workspace, and choosing Motion. Okay, so now we know a little bit about the timeline and how to get started. What we're going to do is we're going to do the first thing, we're just going to make everything come in kind of as at the beginning, where it just kind of comes in bang, 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 with no special effects. So one last bit of introduction that we need to do, the timeline numbers that are running along here. There's 30 frames, basically. There's 30 pictures for every second of video. So you can see here we have an option for 10 frame, 20 frame, 1 second, 110, 122, so on and so forth. Right now, by default, this video is set to be 5 seconds long. We don't want that. It's going to be way too long for a 5-second bumper. So the very, very first thing we're going to need to do is drag all of these layers back to this 3-second mark. And that's a little bit tedious, but hey, so be it. So we bring all of those back to 3 seconds so that our animation is actually that 3 seconds. And you don't have to worry if it's like 3:01, that's fine. And you'll notice once they all come back, the whole thing kind of snaps back. While we're here sort of talking about it, let me hide my dock here. Down below, to zoom in and out of your timeline, you can use these little mountain sliders down here. So if I was to drag this to the right, you can see it expands, and now I can see 1 frame, 2 frame, 3 frame, or I can of course zoom that all the way back and have an extremely small thing. So that's a little bit more management. You're going to want to zoom in. If you want to do some exact stuff, you can zoom way in or way out. For now, let's just get it so it's fitting on the screen. Okay, now let's get this thing to come in. I'm going to go ahead and use these 10 frame marks, and that's what I usually do when I'm doing things like a bumper, is just kind of set it on 10 frames at a time. So what I want is, first, I don't want anything for the first 10 seconds, but what I'm going to want to have it start is the N at 10, E, W, S, and then Whack News at the end. So I'll set this in here, and the way I can trim the beginning of when this starts is I take the cursor, and if I move it to the front of the N, it changes to a little kind of trim arrow, and I'll move that so it starts at the 10. And you can see on the little line that it tells me where does it start and what's the duration of that clip. Oops, sorry. So there's 10. I'll take the E and move it to 20. I'll take the W and move it to 1 minute, which is the same thing as 30 frames. And the S, I'll move to 110. Lastly, we want this whack. We're going to have the whack come in at 1 and 20 frames. So now, just right there, we could do a very easy animation where it just goes, and we're done. So we could do it that simple, but we're going to do in the next couple of videos a couple interesting, more interesting things just to show you how.